Hello and a warm welcome to Captains of Industry. I am Godfrey Motizwa. Now, the man in the hot seat this week is Norbert Sasse, is CEO of Growthpoint Properties. Norbert, thanks for your time. When I was looking up my notes on you and trying to understand where I would tackle you from, I actually made a little note to myself and I wanted to call you the dealer. Would that be an accurate description of the career that you have had so far?
Yeah, probably. I think certainly there's been a number of quite significant deals over the last 12 odd years that we've been busy with Growthpoint Properties. And obviously prior to that, in terms of my work experience, I was in corporate finance, initially with Ernst Young and after that with Investec. And so, yeah, doing deals, being involved with deals is part of what I really enjoy. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's probably quite apt.
Do you keep count?
I haven't kept count, no. I think it's about time that I do start a bit of a scorecard, it's been quite a busy period of late. So it's time that I started keeping score.
Tell me, if someone had said to you as you were beginning then in the 1990s, and said to you, Norbert, you're going to build a billion rand business, not billion rand, but multi-billion rand business. I mean, from 50 million rand, I was looking up the notes here. Now, Growthpoint is worth about 50 billion plus going forward. Would you have said, yes, that's the plan, I'm going to do this, I will do it?
No, I don't think there's any.
So how did it happen?
Chance. It's, I guess, a culmination of factors and I guess a bit of luck, as well. Certainly a lot of luck, I would have thought. I set out, I guess, I knew what I wanted to do quite early on. I wanted to be a chartered accountant. That's pretty much where I started off, and things just happened, from there. I knew that I didn't want to stay in accounting. That corporate finance and deal making was more what I really enjoyed. The stock market and the intricacies of mergers and acquisitions and negotiations. That's what I enjoyed. And one thing led to another. Whilst I was doing. Whilst I was in my corporate finance career, corporate finance is very varied. So one day you're involved with hospital groups, the next day you're involved with construction companies.
Oh, it's a little bit like journalists, that's what we do. You report one day this.
You need to be, but your clients, expect you to be a sort of an expert in every single field,
those
every
companies.
deal, understanding those companies, and it was pretty taxing, to be able to try and stay on top of the IT industry. And I always thought that one day I'd like to focus on a particular industry and specialize.
Yeah.
The South African market was never really big enough for that. And then, in 2000, I think, whilst I was still at Investec, the opportunity came to focus on an industry. And if you said to me it would be property, I would have said there's no way. So it would,
too boring.
Too boring. Property is too small. There's too little. But once you get into the industry, you see for yourself how multifaceted it is and how interesting it can be. And now we've done I don't know how many countless deals in the last 10 to 12 odd years, growing the company from the 30 odd million market cap to market cap today 45 odd billion.
So let's try and pick the peak periods in that career that you have had. I mean, 25 years now you have been at this, and perhaps some of the challenging ones as well.
Yeah, I think day one is getting your chartered accountant qualification behind you. I think that's certainly a highlight, and I think anybody should strive for that. Yeah, big hoo-ha. I think it's a phenomenal qualification, and still something that is very well worth pursuing today. Then I guess moving on from there is a little bit of international experience. I went overseas.
That was always part of the plan.
But in I've never written myself a 10-year plan or a 15-year plan and said I need to achieve the following. Things just seem to happen.
This is not Bill Clinton, I'm going to go get into politics, I'm going to marry a beautiful woman, and then I'm going to the White House and then write a book.
Not at all. And I went overseas for just short of 3 years in the early 90s, 94, 5 and 6, and got a bit of an international experience, again in the merger and acquisition field, at that time. Came back to South Africa, joined Investec Corporate Finance. I think that was another highlight, getting into one of the more reputable corporate finance houses in the country, and gaining your experience, cutting your teeth there, doing deals, learning the stock exchange rules, all those sorts of things. And then probably the single biggest turning point, for me was the opportunity to get involved with the Growthpoint properties and the property funds that Investec managed in those days.
How did that happen? Were you headhunted?
No, I was, or let's call it maybe internally headhunted at Investec. Yes.
Okay.
So,
you were at Investec then?
I was at Investec at the time in their corporate finance team. And Investec had the management rights over two small listed funds, Growthpoint Properties and Metboard Properties. And I was advising the Growthpoint Properties board at the time on a major transaction, the first transaction that Growthpoint actually did, major transaction, which was the reverse listing of the entire direct property portfolio of the Mines Pension Fund.
Right.
Into Growthpoint, and that transformed Growthpoint overnight from a fund with about 120 million of property to a fund with about 1.2 billion of property. Sorry, 1.7 billion of property.
Right.
And the gentleman who ran Investec's property business at the time, Sam Hackner and Sam Leon, approached me and they said, "Look, we need somebody to come and run this business now. It's listed, it's got a market cap of over $1 billion."
How old were you then?
That would have been in 2000, so 36.
Right.
Yeah, 36.
Right.
And they said, "Look, do you want to change career? You're leaving corporate finance and come and run property full time." And it took a lot of convincing. Property in the early 2000s was a swear word. Nobody wanted to know about commercial property. The listed sector, I think the total market cap of the listed sector was less than 5 billion rand in those days.
Yeah.
Property hadn't performed well. And so it really was a big decision for me. Corporate finance, you're used to earning good money.
Yeah.
And I said to the guys, "Can you guarantee me bonuses if I come across to property?" Because property wasn't making money for Investec at the time. And they said, "No, we can't guarantee anything. We've got to, make a decision here," which I did. And
no regrets.
I haven't looked back from there. It's just been a phenomenal ride.
Yeah. So take us through, Mr. Dealmaker. Take us through when you look at a deal and you're trying to make an acquisition. So you begin, of course, the groundwork, trying to understand the sector that you're looking at, et cetera, et cetera. Is there any particular point in that whole process when you feel like this is the moment that you thoroughly most enjoy, personally?
I guess the analysis, the detailed analysis of
understanding
the
target.
Understanding the targets, and property being an asset class that you can go and physically look at and inspect. Right. I must say, I really enjoy the art of property, if you want to call it that. Going out and looking at the shopping centre, going to inspect and kick the tires, if you want. The industrial warehouse or the office building. That is really exciting. And then taking the numbers, by being an accountant, fundamentally
crunching
I'm driven by numbers and crunching them and trying to make sense of them. How do these numbers stack up to what you saw? The bricks and mortar, making that picture, forming a picture out of all of that, and then getting an understanding of, is this a good deal or a bad deal? Are you overpaying for the property relative to its replacement cost?
Right.
Are the tenancies, is it over rented? Is it under rented? What yield are you potentially buying this asset at, and how are you going to fund it?
Right.
Because at the end of the day, you need to fund the purchase of this asset.
Yeah.
Debt, the cost of debt, the mix of debt, and bringing in the equity. So all of those aspects, I think, at the end of the day, is I find really, really, really interesting. But probably one of the biggest highlights is visiting the underlying assets
and actually seeing it and assessing it.
Correct. Yeah. One of my early mentors at Investec said to me, you never buy a property, obviously, unless you've seen it. And there's not a property in that portfolio. We currently got about 430 in South Africa. We've got about 41 in Australia, and we've all got the share in the V&A waterfront. There's not a property that I haven't seen myself and been to look at and kick the tires, if you will. Yeah,
we're going to talk about the waterfront and all those other properties, but I just wanted to check if there's anything that you have, any property that you have acquired that hasn't turned out the way you originally thought. it would.
Yeah, I think so. You know, in growing the portfolio as we have, you know,
With
it's been a
400
mix.
plus, yeah.
Yeah. From a start, I think our starting point was about 9.
Right.
You know, the way in which you've accumulated the portfolios have been through various mechanisms.
Right.
Purchase of individual assets, merger and acquisition activity, so delisting of a couple of other listed property funds on the stock exchange. And sometimes when you do the pure corporate deal, you get a little bit removed from the bricks and mortar.
Yeah.
And I think there was one transaction that we did where we focused too much on the numbers and not enough on the bricks and mortar. And you found at the end of the day, when you're trying to marry the numbers to the bricks and mortar, that, you know, that marriage wasn't 100% there. Always need to be very careful not to forget that fundamentally property is about bricks and mortar. Yes, it's also financial and a financial instrument in a way, and there's a big part of funding and financing around property.
Yeah.
But never forget the bricks and mortar.
And the top performer, the like really outstanding achievement in terms of the deals that you have done?
I would say more recently the venture into Australia. If you look at the financial performance, our timing of going into Australia in September 2009 was, you know, I think, you know, again, you know, a lot of luck.
Yeah,
but
you got in at the right time.
Got in at the right time.
Because Australia is probably one of the few global economies that has escaped the recession and all the bad stuff that we've been seeing out of these other geographies.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, we just got extremely lucky from a timing perspective. And if you analyze what actually happened there, you know, from again, separating the financing side from the bricks and mortar.
Right.
The bricks and mortar side of things in Australia never missed a beat. As you say, they never went into recession. Our portfolio there has been 100% let for the last 3 years.
Wow.
And what created the opportunity was on the financing side, where a lot of those listed companies had extended themselves beyond their financial means, too much gearing.
Yeah.
And what Australia didn't have was a recession, but what it did have was a proper financial crisis, banking crisis.
Right, true.
And that created the opportunity. And we went in there, and you know, I thought it was quite a bold move in 2009. The world was in recession. And you know, we took the bold step and went there, and it's turned out very good for us. So more recently, that and the waterfront, I think, is obviously also a big highlight.
Spectacular deals, yeah. But that's interesting because I think, I don't know if you've looked at actually the stories. I mean, there are some of the stories that we've written about how South African companies that have gone to Australia have struggled. I mean, there are a few that have made it. Investec is amongst one of those. Yeah. And interestingly, you come from an Investec background. But the large bulk of the South African companies that have gone there have struggled to perform, and we've seen exits. I mean, recently we had Pick n Pay stepping out. There must be something that you're doing right there that these other guys perhaps are missing a little bit. Yeah.
I think it also depends on the industry. You know, I think at the end of the day, property, we sort of argue that, you know, property, if you've got the right property in the right location, you know, why is somebody not going to rent from you? I think it's very different from retail, and I think the guys who really failed more recently have been some of the retailers. And I think there, you know, it's understanding that Australian market. What do those retailers want? You know, you can't take South African products and offer it to Australians. You know, they've got their own tastes and they've got their own dynamics. You know, but property, you know, if you've got the right, you know, office or the right industrial warehouse, and it's in a good location, you know, you have to say, why would an Australian not let it, you know, from you, as opposed to from somebody else?
Yeah.
But I think our approach also there has been to create an Australian company.
Right.
Yes, we're the largest shareholder, but it is an Australian company run by Australians. The staff there are all Australian, the chairman is Australian, and the assets are all Australian assets. And it's a product that we're trying to encourage the Australian investment community and asset management fraternity to invest into. So it's not a South African product in Australia. It's an Australian company.
Exactly what I was going to say. I was going to say it's not a South African owned company in Australia. It's an Australian company run by Australians, but of course controlled from South Africa.